What's up, everybody? My name is Austin Deere, and this is my co-host, Hunter Simons, and we're here to bring you episode 4 of the Around the Rotunda podcast. We're here to break down a pretty, I guess you could say, surprising week against Clemson, the number one team in the country. Hunter, I think things probably went a little bit better than expected in some ways, and in other ways, also a little bit frustrating. I think there was opportunities there for us to maybe keep it a little bit closer than what the final score showed. UVA did come out with a loss, losing 41-23. But even though it was an 18-point game, I think there's a lot to be excited about coming away from that game.
For sure, definitely think there was a lot of good takeaways. I think in terms of like losing, when you lose to a team like Clemson, that's number one team in the country, obviously you don't want to say there's moral victories, but I truly felt like there was a lot of positives to take from the game. Holding someone like Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and that entire offense to, I know it sounds crazy saying only 41 points, but I mean, they usually run it up even more against other teams. And we also proved an ability to effectively move the ball down the field against one of the best defenses in the country. So I think there's a lot to be proud of. And at the same time, echoing a lot of what Bronco said in his pressers, like we went there to win. Like we weren't there in the business of moral victories. We went there to try to win the game. So, until we do that against them, we won't be satisfied. And I just love that response, after a game where a lot of coaches would walk away and be like, hey, I'm just happy we were competitive. Because ultimately it's kind of an accomplishment when you do that against Clemson.
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, like you said, the offense was able to move the football. And I mean, goodness gracious, it was literally just I think we were a few plays away from really having Clemson on their heels a little bit. And, I think you could definitely tell the frustration from Dabo, especially, when we scored that last minute touchdown going into halftime to, keep the game respectable going into the half. And, it was the frustration of this team doesn't belong in the same category as us. And, when you have people on Twitter and, other social media outlets saying, wow, this UVA team might be legit this year, that's something to really take note. And, so overall, I think, like you said, yes, we didn't come away with a victory here, but I think there's a lot of things that, to be excited about. And, let's go ahead and dive right into the game. First of all, what kind of day did Brennan have? It was almost like the same type of scenario when it came down to the Duke game. Like it was a rough start, wasn't pretty early. I think it was like 0 for his first 8, something like that. In the passing game, like it wasn't. I guess there was a couple drop passes there, but overall, seemed like he was rushing in the pocket again, and he just didn't really feel comfortable. Which I mean, given this is his first start against a team of this caliber, I wasn't really expecting it to be all that pretty, to be honest. He ended up finishing the day with he was 24 for 43, so over 50%. 270 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And one thing that's worth noting, he ran the ball 22 times for 89 yards. He pretty much carried our running game since Wayne Talapapa really wasn't that much of a factor, which is kind of a little bit of a disappointment, since he had such a big day against Duke. And, we thought that, oh, wow, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on him. But, I think the defensive front for Clemson is a lot more respectable than their secondary. And I think that was kind of the main goal, is to attack that and, kind of let the game play itself out. And, I think overall Brennan kind of found his footing, and, we were able to sustain drives, especially with his legs. He really kept the ball moving. And, I think overall, yes, the 2 interceptions definitely didn't come at timely opportunities. And, especially when, we threw one in the end zone, and gosh, that pick in the end zone. I mean, I think if anybody didn't get an opportunity to go watch that replay, that might be the interception of the year, and probably one of the best interceptions I think I've ever seen in a while. One-handed grab. I mean, it was just, he stretched back, and it was just an unreal play by the Clemson defender, and, credit to him, honestly. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do about that when somebody makes a play like that, but ultimately it just didn't really come at a good time, especially when you're trying to stay in the game late in the game. But, overall, I would say we're seeing a lot of growth out of Brennan. I think he's starting to figure this offense out a little bit, starting to make the plays that are needed to make.
Yeah, first off, dudes on defense aren't supposed to make catches like that. Like,
Exactly.
come on. Odell Beckham Jr. impersonation out there. I mean, I think as we kind of just mentioned, lots of takeaways that's promising from Brennan Armstrong. I think he's proving a lot of the doubters wrong. One thing that's really notable to me after 2 games, and you could argue what you want about Duke maybe not being the best opponent, but one of them being against Clemson in Death Valley on your second career start, he's actually leading the conference right now in total yards per game on offense, which is kind of unreal to me. I would not have expected that through 2 games, but I think he showed his dynamic ability as well. And overall, like what everyone says, regardless of if they think Brennan Armstrong is a good player or not, is that they at least admit he's a super tough guy that's willing to put his body on the line for the team. And I think it's kind of a similar situation last week where I said, hey, it takes him getting hit a couple of times to really start to get in the flow of the game. And by God, on that first third down play that we had, I think it was 3rd and 10, we ran a quarterback draw where he picked up 10 yards. He got the first down, but man, did he pay for it. That middle linebacker for Clemson, Skalski, that looks like he could be Zane Zandier's father, laid him out. I'm sure he's still feeling that one. But, I mean, overall, like super impressed with him. I think he gave their defense fits when he actually got in the rhythm. He was able to start finding receivers all over the field. And, after a little bit of a patchy start, he really came together in the fourth quarter and, put together another really promising display. So I'm at a point with him where I expect him to do well. And, I think that he is just endearing himself to Cavalier fans across the state, across the country now, with just that emotion that he plays with, like we had kind of alluded to in the preseason preview. So I'm loving what I'm seeing so far. And I know that there's still a whole lot he can get better at as well. So really optimistic there.
For sure. And, I think this is one thing that I've noticed so far is, when you're making your first 2 starts ever, it can be frustrating when you throw a pick here and there, and, that could really kill somebody's mindset. I think Brennan just has this killer mentality out there of, an interception here or there isn't going to stop him from playing the game that he knows how he can play it. He's going to continue to fight and do whatever he can and make sure, we find a way to win that football game. And, I think we saw that especially against Duke. And, we saw this in the Clemson game as well. I mean, sure, Clemson's a little bit more of a different opponent and everything, but overall, there was a lot of fight left all the way down to the end. And I mean, we can count this as a blessing that we didn't give up a 60 spot this year. But, as far as hitting on the wide receiving corps, this was the Billy Kemp show. He did it last year against Clemson, and he did it again this year. 10 receptions for 96 yards. He's become a very respectable slot receiver. I mean, he's not the the big household name that everybody talks about, and oh man, like he wasn't that big guy coming into college that everybody expected to be a superstar. Which in a way, like I wouldn't necessarily say he still is. He's just kind of that guy that flies under the radar and gets the job done. I mean, 10 receptions for 96 yards. He catches the football. He finds ways to get it open. He's a great slot receiver. He's everything that you could ask for a slot receiver. It was it was good that he did that because Clemson found a way to lock down Lavelle Davis. Obviously that was probably a primary emphasis for them. He only had 2 receptions for 58 yards. So, it was that was a big thing. And, Jana and Tony Poljan both had steady days. They both caught touchdowns. I think Jana had 5 receptions for like 50-some yards, and Poljan had 3 receptions as well to add to that. But, overall, I don't think Billy Kemp really gets enough credit for the impact that he has in this passing game. And, he's a hometown guy right here in Richmond, Virginia. And it's pretty cool to see the success that he's having there. And he's kind of really, I think, starting to really make a name for himself. People are starting to get excited and kind of know, especially in just the Virginia community as a whole, they're starting to know who this kid is. And, how about Keaton Thompson with a receiving touchdown, ? That was definitely a surprise, but I think this is kind of what, they've been talking about. Yeah, surprise for some. I think this is something that we kind of were hinting at in preseason of how are they going to utilize him with Brennan being a starting quarterback? Are they going to kind of have offensive sets where both of them are on the field? And, I think this was the, question where you throw number 99 quarterback out there, and everybody's like, what the heck is this guy doing out here? And like, nobody knows what to do with it. Wide open in the end zone for a 3-yard touchdown. And, there you go. So that was pretty interesting to see. I'm really interested to see, going forward, how else are they going to find ways to use him? I think we could possibly see him end up in the backfield with Brennan at times. And, it could really open up some opportunities for big plays as well.
Yeah, man. And I want to go back to Billy Kemp just for a second, because one additional thing that I just think is so impressive, and obviously here as like UVA fans, like I think I gave you my sleeper pick before the season started, and I know I wasn't alone within the fan base in saying this, that I think he might just lead the team in receptions this year because of just the role he's going to play, kind of filling in to Joe Reed's shoes and Zacchaeus before him. That's just such an essential role in UVA's short passing game. But another thing I think is really notable is that in Dabo's press conference in the week, during the week leading up to the game, he name dropped and called out Billy Kemp as someone that they're worried about and that they need to prepare for. And knowing that like Clemson does their homework on the teams they're playing against, they scheme, they implement schemes to try to prevent the players on the other team that they identify as like impactful from making plays. And yet he still had 10 receptions for 96 yards and was like an essential part of our offense moving the ball forward. So I think that's just a testament to him. Obviously I'm sure they were also trying to implement some schemes to prevent some Lavelle Davis long touchdown plays. And, you can say that kind of worked, although he still averaged over 25 yards per reception. But Kemp, they had no real answer for. I mean, when he got down the field and was open, I mean, he made things happen, and he's clearly demonstrating an ability to do that no matter who the opponent is. And with Keaton Thompson, I think based on the way Bronco talked in the presser and, some rumblings that I had heard from a couple of people coming out of camp, I think he's essentially a full-time receiver at this point. I mean, God forbid something happens to Brennan, he probably factors into that equation, but I think they feel comfortable enough with the other backup quarterbacks that they have that clearly they're willing to put him out on the field on not just gadget plays. Like he's a part of the offense as a receiver, and whether he's only gotten one reception on the year so far, but he's played a really big role in the blocking, and run blocking, and also like getting down the field on when someone catches a route or catches a ball on a route underneath. So I think that he, expect to see him play even more. I would only anticipate his involvement to increase now.
For sure. And, I think it's worth noting with the offensive line as well. I really want to give a lot of credit to them. They only allowed 3 sacks on the entire day, which, given when you really think about it, is probably not the greatest thing in the world, but it definitely could have been a lot worse. Given that front seven. I think it's really a testament as to how good this offensive line is. I mean, Brennan ran the ball for, 89 yards? Yeah, 89 yards on the ground just for him alone. And, he had a lot of time in the pocket to throw. I really felt like, they protected Brennan the best possible way they could, especially with a more, mature Clemson defensive line. So definitely a lot of impressive stuff there. As far as the defense goes, I think there was – it was pretty clear that it wasn't their best day. There was a lot of missed tackles, a lot of third down longs. Obviously, you can get into that a little bit more here shortly, but Nick Jackson led the team in tackles with 12. Nick Jackson, Joey Blunt, Zane Zandier, and Noah Taylor combined for 34 out of the 54 tackles for the entire team. So pretty much the 4 of them were the big key players for the day. One guy I wanted to really give a shout out to was Jameer Carter. He's a true freshman. He had a run stop at right around the goal line when Clemson was about to score. Running back ran right up the middle, and he busted right through the Clemson offensive line and made the stop, and they didn't go anywhere. I just think that's such a testament as to what this guy could possibly be capable of. I was excited when he committed to UVA, especially because I follow his dad on Twitter, and he just preaches hard work and strength. And, I think this is a kid that people are going to want to remember going forward. Jameer Carter, he could be a huge force on that defensive line. And especially with Jawan Briggs and those guys up there, man, it could be a lot of fun to watch how these guys develop. So that's as
For
far as
sure.
the defense goes. Nothing really too overly excited. We didn't have any turnovers, which I think was pretty a big factor. But when you're playing against guys like Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, they're going to take care of the football. And we saw that again here this weekend. And they drove the ball down. We had a lot of opportunities to stop them, and flat out we didn't. And ultimately that's what kind of led to the final score. It ended up being what it was. And so, kind of looking at the score outcome and what we originally projected.
I want to get a couple points in before you run ahead too far.
All right, well then go ahead. That's fine. We can take it.
I just wanted to call out. Yeah, and I mean Blunt was really impressive to me on the day, and he only played like 75% of the downs, as I think he was battling some hamstring injuries throughout the day. But he got a sack by way of an intentional grounding. Richard Burney had another sack, so he's got 2 sacks in 2 games, which I think might be more than he had of all last season, or at least close to the total season mark that he had. And then, I'm sorry, I wanted to rewind 1 second back to the offensive line as well. Just one thing I think that's really worth pointing out is, think back through the past 5 years of UVA football, essentially since Bronco's taken the helm. I can't even think of more than one instance where Virginia ran a quarterback sneak. And anytime that they did, when a team hardly ever runs quarterback sneaks, it's not necessarily anything about the quarterback as much as it's just not having a lot of faith in the offensive line being able to get a big enough push. And I think we saw our offense. We ran 2 quarterback sneaks in one game against Clemson, who's obviously going to have a very physical, large defensive line. So seeing our coaching staff have the faith in the offensive line to put them in a situation where we say, no, like, we're going to match up against you, and we're about to run the football, and that's okay, because we know we have the guys up front and we have the people running the football that are going to be able to get the job done. So, even seeing, I think there was one like 4th and 1 play where we ran Calipapa off tackle. I mean, to get off tackle on a 4th and 1 situation where the box is stacked that tight, you have to have a really good initial surge with the offensive line. So just seeing plays like that, even being capable of being run rather than just trying to like smash the ball up the middle and Wayne create a hole by running into offensive linemen. I mean, I think that's just like huge. Like, it might be these things that, the average person doesn't see, but like when you're looking at the game super analytically, that's a really good sign. So I just wanted to make a couple of those points before we run too far ahead. Appreciate you allotting me
for sure. Time. No, I was just so excited. I was so excited about how close we were on the projected score outcomes. I mean, I put it at 42-10, so a little bit closer. UVA put up a few more points than I was expecting. So, obviously I'm not going to be upset about that. And, you almost had a dead on the money at 41-17. So I think for the most part, our score predictions were pretty respectable on that front.
For sure. But, and I've had the same trend back-to-back weeks. I project the other team's score correctly, but I have been missing 1 touchdown for UVA in my prediction. I think I had 31-20 as my Duke prediction. That one ended up 38-20. And then obviously this game ended up being 41-23. I had 41-17. So I got to have a little bit more faith in the UVA offense is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. So you're on a roll, and, talking about, you being on a roll, let's, you kind of gave our keys to victory, and, why don't you kind of go over how UVA fared in those keys.
Yeah, definitely. So the first key to victory that I had laid out before this game was being played was to limit big plays. And I actually gave us a B+ overall here. I had talked about last week how last year when we played Clemson, the thing that killed us more than anything else was actually just getting the receivers getting over the top of our defense and running backs breaking tackles for long runs. And obviously that kind of happened a little bit in this game. But for the most part, I had talked about setting a seal over the top of the defense and essentially make them play underneath us and rely on our defensive backs to make tackles and to be able to get pressure on Trevor Lawrence. And while we didn't get a ton of sacks, we had 2, he was having to get the ball out a little bit quicker than I think he's used to. He wasn't able to make the throws downfield that he has been able to in the past, especially against Virginia. So I felt like we actually did really well. the longest touchdown was only 27 yards to Amari Rogers. And if you remember that play, it was Trevor Lawrence made an unbelievable throw where Rogers was over on the left sideline and he saw space in the middle of the field and basically chucked the ball over to where the space was, knowing that his receiver could pull off of our safety. You hear all the time in the media people talking about Trevor Lawrence throwing his receivers open. That was a classic case of that. So if that's the biggest touchdown play we gave up, I think that we have to say that we did a pretty good job here. So I was happy with that aspect of the game. The second piece that I had was for UVA to establish the run. I've given us a C+ for this. We actually ran the ball relatively well in terms of yardage. We had 147 yards on the ground, which actually outgained Clemson by 10 yards in this category. Obviously, a majority of the yards came from Armstrong on his 22 carries with 89 yards. But I also thought that Talapapa had a pretty solid game. He only had 13 carries, but he was able to get 49 yards, which isn't the greatest yards per carry. But when you factor in against the defense that we were playing against, and the fact that most of his runs came in obvious run situations, I would say there's definitely progress, and a lot of that comes from the offensive line. So I think getting a C+ in this category, not the end of the world, but we also have some places that we can improve as well. And then the final category that I had as our key to victory was taking our chances, and I've given us a C here. And there's a bunch of offsetting stuff that I see. The good things were that, as I had hoped for, we didn't really ever back down when the situation got big. And when we had fourth downs in their territory, we almost always went for it. Well, we displayed a willingness to go out and try to make big plays, even when they didn't work. Quite a few times they did work, and we were able to come up with the right play to advance the ball and fourth downs deep in their territory that extended drives that ended up leading to points. The bad side was that there were a couple times in terms of execution where we made some costly mistakes that, had we not made those mistakes, we could have really made Clemson sweat. The biggest one that comes to mind was the first drive of the second half. We had come off of just scoring a touchdown right before halftime to make the score 24-10. It felt like the momentum was on our side, and we knew we were getting the ball first in the second half. And, we get the ball and we just march right down the field. We have a really nice drive going, and Brendan Armstrong had a beautiful completion down the left sideline to Davis on a 25, 30-yard play. And I think he got a little bit too overly eager to make it happen again on the next play. And that's when Clemson did make the remarkable one-handed interception. So I think it's just decision-making and a little bit of execution. And then I think there was one other instance in the fourth quarter when we had gotten down the field into the red zone and went for it on a fourth down, and we tried a lob ball to Poljan in a one-on-one situation with a pretty athletic safety, where I wasn't a huge fan of the play call, but I respected the fact that we were going for it in that situation. So, I think the best part of this, key to the game was that it didn't really come down to the decision-making on the coach's staff. It was really actually just execution, and in key moments we came up short a couple times. And I think if we can find a way, especially as this team gels and becomes more mature, to turn a couple of those instances into points, guys are really not as far away from the Clemsons of the world as it might feel like. It really is just a game of 3 or 4 or 5 plays.
For sure. No, I completely agree with you. And I think, you hit it, hit it around the nail. It was a very much an up and down game. A lot of things to be happy about, a couple of things, obviously, when you look back at the game, as far as, just my reaction goes, third and longs, way too many conversions on Clemson's part. Take a couple of those away, and you have a whole new ball game. We're getting more offensive possessions. Clemson's being stalled, and just plays that we couldn't afford to have happen are the ones that happened. And, and it contributed, his tackling issues were, a main factor in that.
Yeah.
But, overall, just a couple other things, Brennan's future is obviously very bright. I definitely think we're seeing more pieces from him that is exciting. And I think it's only going to get better as the year goes on. So I'm definitely excited about that. Kemp is pretty much the hero of the wide receiving group, I think, right now. Especially until Jana, I think, really turns it on, which I'm hoping will happen in the next game, if not the next couple. It was good to see him get a touchdown this past week, but we definitely need a little more production out of him. I think if we really want this offense to succeed, and then so I think we honestly learned a lot about ourselves. I think during this game, there was a lot that we learned on offense as far as Brennan goes. We learned on defense. I think tackling needs to be better, and I think the coaches know that. So I think as far as we can take away from this game, obviously, yes, we lost, and it's upsetting about that. But what we can take away is that this was a completely different ball game than what we saw in the ACC championship. It wasn't a blowout victory where it never felt like we had a prayer. Like, people were sweating in the third quarter, wondering, "Oh man, is UVA actually going to keep this game close?" And so, I think that's something to be excited about.
I mean, Trevor Lawrence played every drive of the game except for one, and the one drive that he didn't play, there was we attempted an onside kick that they recovered, and the guy essentially just ran out the clock that came in at quarterback. I mean, how often do you get to see Trevor Lawrence in the fourth quarter of an ACC football game? Not very often. So anyone out there in the media that's saying, Clemson just Clemsoned them, no, they didn't. Like, anyone that actually watched the game and that's a reputable, pundit within the media has come out and said, wow, Virginia really impressed me. Brennan Armstrong really impressed me. Clemson, it wasn't a matter of Clemson having a bad game. Virginia just came to play and competed and showed that they belong. And I think that's just a huge testament to how far we've come as a program. And one other thing that I wanted to note that I thought was pretty funny was I can't remember if it was in the coach's corner or the weekly press conference that Bronco does, but he had mentioned that he was asked a question about the third and longs and that being an issue. And obviously any fan, you don't even have to be a huge football fan to understand, hey, you get a team with a 3rd and 16, they probably shouldn't convert. But he made the point that in the game plan all week, their thought process was, hey, we're going to be able to get Clemson in a bunch of 3rd and short situations, and that's where we're going to have to stop them. We assume that they'll gain a couple of yards on 1st and 2nd down, and that we should try to stop them in this 3rd and short to 3rd and medium game. He didn't ever in his wildest dreams assume that Clemson's average yards to gain on 3rd down would be 8.8 yards, and a majority of them, or at least a good number of them, were over 10 yards. And
exactly.
He just candidly said, we didn't have a game plan for that because we didn't expect that to happen. And next time around, you can bet your butt that Bronco will be prepared for 3rd and 16. So I just thought that was pretty funny though, and it comes down to the way that you prepare, and this coaching staff hardly ever makes the same mistake twice. So I know that they'll be prepared if they get another shot at Clemson, whether it's later this season or maybe down the road in another season. So
absolutely. And so this upcoming week we have NC State, who's coming off a huge win against Pitt. But before we get to that, I think we have something that we need to address that happened this past week. Hunter, do you want to address the ACC network first of all? And then I have one specific person that I would like to rant about for a quick minute. So go ahead and tell us about your issues with the ACC network.
Sure. So, I kind of started a thread on Twitter by accident when I just started noticing things throughout the day where I was just like, man, how unprofessional is the ACC network? And I get that there are some circumstances they're working with during this COVID era where maybe they don't have quite the production team on site that they normally do, but it was kind of ridiculous, man. I was watching the Duke versus Virginia Tech game before the Virginia game, and the number of times that they messed up the down and distance to go. I saw one where it said like 0th down and like 100 yards to go. And I was like, how is that even like programmable into the system, for one? And then a couple times, there was like plays where I guess whoever was setting that number on the screen assumed that they had gotten a first down on the play before, but in reality it was like a 3rd down and 2. And the team maybe has a negative 1 yard play and has to punt on the next play, and you look at the screen and it says it's 2nd 11, and you see a team out on the field in punt formation. It's just like, come on, guys. This is like the most basic stuff in broadcasting. And then don't even get me started on the announcers. Like, that was a problem last year too. Like, they're just sometimes so uneducated about like what they're actually talking about. But it's a continuation. And honestly, I've just not been impressed with the ACC network at all. And I thought maybe after the first year they'd be able to work out a couple kinks, maybe replace a few people that weren't really getting the job done. And really all they've done is doubled down on the people they have, and the production value has gotten worse. And it's honestly just kind of miserable to watch. I mean, especially when your team is the one that's subject to the horrible production. So, and I know we have a big bone to pick with Mr. Mark, so I'll let you unleash your wrath on it.
All right. So I promised in the tweet that I would be going on a rant. Well, I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet, but I would like to talk about Mr. Mark Richt for a quick moment. In case you didn't know, after UVA's win versus Duke, our wonderful athletic trainer, who has been super helpful with helping our team fight off COVID-19 through the spring and summer, got to break the rock at the end of the game after we won. Super cool moment, everything that you could have asked for an opening season win, especially for a team that has really, prided themselves on their, with the things that they put in place to, keep the team safe from the disease. And the report came out before the Clemson game that UVA had 7 players inactive because they had tested positive for COVID earlier on in the week. But everything was fine before the Clemson game, so we were able to play the game. No harm, no foul. Wasn't any starters, so UVA ended up being okay. This man, Mark Richt, had the audacity to say that, maybe they counted their chickens a little too early and she shouldn't have broken the rock. I'm sorry, what? First of all, if you think that we're the only program having this issue, much less it was 7 cases. 7 cases since the start of camp. Give me a break, Mark. I used to have a lot of respect for this guy. I'm not going to lie. I thought he was a class act dude. But to seriously go out and mock the fact that she had to break the rock because the team had so much pride and the amount of work that she had put in to keep this team safe is absolutely classless. It's disrespectful, and it's completely unprofessional. It's absurd. Absolutely. And I was disgusted when I heard it. Was disgusted. And There's a reason why you're at the age that you are and you're sitting in an ACC network booth because you couldn't ever win a big game in your coaching career. You failed at Miami in a down year for the ACC conference, and you had the balls to go on ACC network and say something like that. Give me a freaking break. Man doesn't deserve to be in that job anymore. My rant's over. Take that for what you will, and let's move on to NC State. Mark Richt.
Hold on, I want to call out one thing that I thought was pretty funny too, though. I mean, the situation itself is very sad because if you hadn't heard, Bobby Bowden, longtime Florida State coach, he's 90 years old. He contracted COVID-19, which is obviously a horrible situation, and we all hope the best for him. Obviously, he gave UVA pain throughout the year, but everyone respects that man for who he is on and off the field. And Mark Richt cites Bobby Bowden as his biggest mentor ever. If he had even one drop of the integrity of Bobby Bowden, he would have never made a comment like that on national television. Mark Richt comes out literally, I think it was Sunday or maybe it was Monday, tweeting about Bobby Bowden and how he was just, mortified, or not mortified, but just completely sick at the thought that his mentor is ill with this sickness. And I couldn't help but respond to him and say, all the best to Bobby Bowden. Maybe you shouldn't be making tongue-in-cheek remarks about people contracting COVID now. Just ridiculous that this guy has the audacity. That's after programs like Virginia Tech, and I'm not here to beat down Virginia Tech at the moment in time, but they have 20 plus people out with COVID each week. And you have the audacity to come at University of Virginia, who clearly hasn't demonstrated demonstrated an ability to fight this and to set up the protocols necessary. I just think it's so Bush League to me, honestly. And it just perfectly encapsulated the weekend that was ACC Network in terms of its unprofessionalism. And honestly, at this moment in time, I say Comcast people don't even think about switching, because you miss out on the University of Virginia games, but that station is just a complete joke in my mind. And I've lost entire respect for it now. And let's just be honest, they never liked UVA in the first place. They make it really obvious during football season and even during basketball season, when we're literally the best team in the conference, if not the best team, the second best team. And all they can talk about is Duke and Florida State. And you know what? I'm just sick of it. So that's my portion of the rant. I had to get that out as well.
I completely agree with you. And let's be, and I just want to be clear before we move on to previewing NC State. Obviously, yes, we use Virginia Tech as an example, but we hate that anybody is contracting this disease and is dealing with it in general. We wouldn't wish that upon anyone, not even our biggest rivals. We want everybody to be healthy. We want everybody to be able to enjoy the game of football. So that's not the point that we're trying to make here, and we're not trying to throw shots at anybody. It's just the fact that these comments are being made in the middle of a pandemic is unexcusable. And it made me sick. It still does. And I'm so glad that I could go on that rant because I really needed to. But that being said, it's a new week, and like I said, we're playing an NC State team this week that is coming off a pretty big win against a Pitt team that was known for their defense, and NC State racked up 30 points against them. So definitely some interesting things there after they kind of looked like crap against Virginia Tech the week before. And, this team came out and firing on all cylinders. They're led by their quarterback, Devin Leary. He's honestly, I watched a little bit of that NC State Pitt game, and, I was extremely impressed with him. I think he really can command the field. He has a good vision for coverages, and, his stats show it. He's 40 for 60 with 501 yards and 5 touchdowns with no interceptions. Dude's just a smart ball player. So I think he's somebody that we're really going to look out for. And the way he, kind of tore up Pitt's defense was, it's got to be a little bit of alarming for as a UVA fan to see something like that, where a Pitt team whose defense is their bread and butter, kind of like how UVA's is this year. One has to wonder, okay, well, hopefully Bronco and staff is going to be able to see kind of what they did, and what kind of how are we going to slow this guy down?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that he wasn't started in that Virginia Tech game, and I do know that he had to sit out. I believe it was the Wake Forest game that they had early in the season due to COVID protocols. I believe he was part of contact tracing, but to think that he wasn't playing under center every snap possible that he was available to play is kind of unbelievable. But since he's been able to take over that offense, it's been a completely different team. And I think even their defense has fed off of the offensive production, just not feeling that same pressure to get off of the field. I think that they know that their offense can put up some points now. And I think coming into the season, everyone knew that they had a couple good running backs that I know you're about to touch on that would be able to, put up some pretty good numbers. And I think having Leary behind center has really been able to alleviate that running game and provided even more opportunities to be successful, just because he's been able to command the field as well, as you just kind of mentioned. He's put up some incredible numbers for just 2 games playing. And I think he's added a whole different twist to their offense that's allowing them to be a lot more successful now.
For sure. And, speaking about, NC State's running game, it's pretty much a running back by committee with, two main guys and Zonovan Knight and Ricky Pearson. These two guys have really lit it up the first 3 games. Zonovan has 32 attempts for 220 yards and a touchdown, and Ricky Pearson has 41 attempts for 202 yards and 3 touchdowns. So they really definitely lean heavily on these two guys. So, don't expect, don't shy away from, seeing both of them on the field possibly at the same time, or, in different types of formations. And, it could be a real problem trying to prepare for something like that when you have two main guys that are, carrying the load back there.
Yeah, and I believe Zonovan Knight's nickname is Bam. I think it's regularly called Bam Knight. And if you're a running back with the nickname Bam, I think that kind of lends I think that kind of tells you what sort of running back he is. He's a big dude. He's not afraid to run you over at all. And, you might be in the right place to make the tackle, but you got to bring him down actually to the ground, because he will run you over. But, as we'll touch on as we get further along, I feel pretty good about our ability to stop the run so far this year, but we can touch on that in the keys to victory section.
For sure. So, and, going into their receiving corps, for what I could tell, they had, 3 main guys that they typically, kind of look towards. Devin Carter, especially. This dude's 6'4". He's got 10 receptions of 181 yards on the year and 1 touchdown. We saw Devin Leary, especially, throw a couple back shoulder passes to him. With his height and everything, he's definitely going to be something that we have to look for, especially our corners and safeties. Especially if they get in one-on-one matchups with him, they're really going to have to try and keep him off the ball as much as possible. But then you have also Mika Emizi, who has 12 receptions for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then you have their tight end, who Kerry Angeline, who has 8 receptions for 122 yards and 3 touchdowns. So definitely looking tight end route, probably once they get into the red zone, probably looking for that big guy, coming out of possibly a play action out of a goal line formation or something like that. There's a lot of probably different packages that we could definitely see that used. But overall, as an offense, I think this is a team that clearly they know how to move the football. They can put up points against good defenses like Pitt, and something that UVA should definitely be wary of.
Yeah, and I think the Mika Emizi guy is one that he had a huge game against Pittsburgh, and he actually is the one that caught the game-winning touchdown for them on in the twilight of the game last week, where they were able to take the lead on the last possession. He actually has played for them, I think, for a few years now. If I remember correctly, he scored against Virginia a few years back as well. And he's very similar to the Devin Carter guy as well. I believe he's a 6'3" receiver, kind of in the build of a Jesus Dubois, where he's not like going to kill you with athleticism in terms of speed and, ability to like jump through the roof, but he's got this physical size and ability to kind of fend off defenders and create space for himself just with his physicality. So that'll really, put our defense and our cornerbacks specifically up to the task to show what sort of progress we've made in that part of the game.
100%. And, when you look at this team's defense, obviously they gave up 29 points to Pitt, gave up, I think, over 40 points to Virginia Tech. So it's kind of probably suspect as to how good this defense really is. This is, I think, probably the game that I would expect Brennan to really have his, coming out party. I think he could possibly be in line for a really big day. But, one thing that's worth noting is that NC State does have a very good linebacker group, kind of, probably within almost the same caliber of ours. I don't know if it's as good, but they definitely hold this defense together. Drake Thomas, Isaiah Moore, and Peyton Wilson are all guys that, really – They carry the tackle load for this team. They're all over the field, and they help with the run as well. I definitely think that these are the 3 guys that you kind of have to pay attention to. So the 3 of them, they actually combined for 64 tackles in the first 3 games. That's quite a bit. I think I don't know. I'm kind of suspect on this defense watching them against Pitt. I've never really thought that Pitt had all that great of an offense, and I think there were some times where it's like, I kind of sit there and watch and I'm like, man, I think we could really do some damage against these guys. But they do get to the QB. They have 9 sacks through 3 games. That's pretty respectable. So they have a pretty good front, I think their front seven is, something that, we'll definitely have to look at. I think the offensive line, if they continue to play as well as they do, I don't know how much trouble this NC State team is really going to give them, but it'll be interesting to see. And they really haven't forced a whole lot of turnovers. They have one fumble recovery on the year. They don't have any interceptions. So, like I said, I think the secondary is suspect. I think this is a time that Brennan could really succeed. And I think if he really takes care of the football and if we protect him in the pocket, then it could be a big day for him.
Without a doubt. And, if there was a game for us to prove it in the sense of saying that, we've established a run game this year and we've improved that part of our game. I mean, look what Virginia Tech did to this defense with, some honestly relatively simple play calling, just really great blocking up front. If you can create some holes, the secondary has, their secondary does not tackle super well in the open field. So if you can get guys out in space, especially coming out of the backfield on long run plays, it could be goodbye. Like Khalil Herbert, the guy from Virginia Tech that's, been really impressive so far for them. He had a field day against NC State. And I think that, we have the potential to do that as well. Pitt, despite what we all kind of just assume about Pitt being like a run first, ground and pound type team, they've kind of started to move away from that in the past 2 years and become a really pass heavy offense. And, they weren't really able to put up any great rushing numbers against NC State, but I don't really know if they emphasized it too much. I think Kenny Pickett ended up throwing for 400 yards. And I don't think they really attempted many rushes. So I could see some read option type plays with Brennan Armstrong and Talapapa in the backfield and maybe throw in a little Shane Simpson as well. I could see those working really favorably as we start the game off. And then what that opens up in the play action game and the short passing game as well coming out of it. I really like our chances against this defense, but we will have to execute to be able to produce.
For sure. And lastly, going into their special teams, their kicker is very much respectable. His name's Christopher Dunn. He's perfect on field goals this year, and he has one that he's drilled from 50 plus. So if it comes down to crunch time, something that we have to really think about is they're looking 35 yard line or so. They're in field goal range, and hopefully the defense can step up where we're not going to be in a situation like that where they can hit a field goal to win it or anything to that extent. But we'll see what happens. So overall, I think this is a team that in NC State that's probably might be starting to find their footing. I think there's still some inconsistencies there, but I think they're definitely going to give us more of a fight than Duke did. I think we're definitely going to have a challenge here, but I still see us outperforming this team. I think it could be close, maybe midway through the third quarter, and then a couple plays go our way, and we can really turn the tide. So, but speaking of what's our road to victory, Hunter? What does our team need to do to pull out the get back on the winning track against NC State?
For sure. Yeah, I'll lay out a couple individual points that I have, but I think holistically kind of piggybacking off of what you said, if we just play our game, play a solid game, and execute on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, yes, it might be a little bit close, but we are the more talented team. We are the better football team. We should win if we are able to do that. Now, in terms of how we go about doing that, the first thing that I see is we really, really need to get this monkey off our back in the first quarter in terms of slow starts offensively. The coaches have really been emphasizing it in the media this week. Brennan Armstrong's been emphasizing it. I heard Dylan Rankensmeyer emphasizing it. You hear it from all around the program that they're adding emphasis to starting quickly in games and putting Brennan in situations where he can feel comfortable early on. And it doesn't take until the second or third quarter for him to really start lighting it up. So I think, that's to me, just the next step in his development as a quarterback is just finding a way to be the guy he is in the fourth quarter during the first drive of the game as well. And that's something that Bryce Perkins had to learn over time as well. Early on, I think you had just kind of mentioned this in our preseason prediction podcast. We had labeled this game as a potential breakout party for Brennan Armstrong. And I still think that's 100% on the table. He's starting to gain a little bit of respect around the country, but being met equally with people complaining about his completion percentage and the interceptions and all this. And I think it's time to put all the haters to bed and show them like, hey, like this guy can really ball. You have something to worry about when you go up against the University of Virginia. And, you know, I think the last thing is if we're able to score quickly and just get points on the board in the first couple of drives and maybe distance ourselves from NC State a little bit, you know, that would kill their belief really early on. And I think that could do a lot for this team, especially in this kind of season where, you know, it's just such an odd year. A team on the road goes down early to a gritty, tough team like Virginia that's going to make you like work for everything. If you go down early and you're not really seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, you might see a team just honestly give up on themselves. And they haven't really shown a sign of doing that this year, but, you know, I would just think that that's something that we could possibly do by just like almost that boa constrictor type effect of just, you know, putting points on the board and then the defense getting a bunch of stops. I could see us really distancing ourselves. We're able to do that early on in the game. Second piece, and we touched on this a little bit when we were talking about NC State's receiving core and Devin Leary as a quarterback, but I think a really important thing is going to be our individual matchups in defensive coverage. So Leary has demonstrated this ability repeatedly, especially in the Pitt game, where he's able to make these honestly beautiful back shoulder throws in the corner of the end zone or right near the sideline where his large receivers are able to get upfield and then use the leverage of their large frame to create a bit of space on the sideline. Some questionable push-off penalties. The refs will have to be on their game. But, you know, all that being said, they didn't call it throughout the game, and their receivers were able to get some separation. So, you know, Devontae Cross, Nick Grant, Amos, Brenton Nelson, all these guys that are going to be matched up individually, whether it's in the slot or with wideouts, you know, they're going to have to be physical. They're going to have to fight for the football. They're going to make it difficult for these guys to make plays because they're going to have a little bit of a size advantage, despite the fact that we have two pretty large corners. They still have some huge wide receivers. So I think physicality is going to be huge. And doing all of that without giving up pass interference penalties, you know, it's something that's very inconsistently called across not only the ACC, but across the country. So we're going to have to get a feel for what the refs are calling early on in the game and find what that, like, what's the threshold of physicality that we can have without them throwing a flag. And we're pretty much going to have to bring that on a bunch of different plays.
Sure.
And then the last thing I see defensively is to cause some havoc. So, you know, you hear the coaches talking about the havoc who's and, you know, getting sacks, getting turnovers. I think that, you know, we didn't generate any turnovers against Clemson. Granted, they're not a team that's really going to beat themselves very often like a Duke team did. But I think NC State's kind of a different ball game. You put some pressure on them. Devin Leary, while he has shown a lot of promise, he's still only a sophomore. He's a young guy that I'm sure is prone to making mistakes. He's never seen a defensive front like Virginia. And I don't necessarily mean that in a skill perspective, but just schematically, the way that we play defense, the pressure that we bring, the unpredictability of the linebackers and the safeties bringing pressure. I think it's going to take him a little bit of time to figure out what the heck we're doing. And in that time period, I think we could really generate a couple sacks and turnovers and, you know, give our offense a chance to give us a little bit of an early lead. So, you know, I see if we can, you know, hit on all three of those things, we will have no problem handling this team. But, you know, we're going to have to bring our A game and play a solid game to have a very comfortable win. You know, Vegas really likes UVA coming into this game, which has not been the trend in history. I think we opened up as 9.5 point favorites. I think it's down to like 8.5 or 8 now, but still being over a touchdown favorite in a ACC game is just not something we're super used to, especially playing in the Chaos Coastal.
Exactly.
So I think that maybe it's time to, now that Vegas has given us a little bit of faith, let's give them some reason to continue to believe in us the rest of the season.
For sure. And, you know, I think you hit on everything that, you know, I was thinking as well. You know, it's really going to come down to the defense causing that havoc and, you know, getting back to the ways of getting sacks, getting turnovers, and, you know, what that defense is supposed to be known for. And obviously, Clemson didn't beat themselves up. They're Clemson. They're not going to. And so I think we're going to we're going to see. I think this is going to be the first game that we truly look at this team and see, wow, like this team has a really bright future ahead, especially with Brent at the helm. And I was talking to a buddy of mine a little bit earlier, and he was like, "What's wild to me is that Brennan is a sophomore. Like he still has 2 more years. Like if he's, well, I guess 3, yes, technically, because I guess we still have this full season. I meant more like after this season, but you know what I mean. The amount of time this kid has to
the
develop.
added year of eligibility is what I meant.
So I guess we got to think about that too. Oh, goodness, all these rules with COVID and everything, it's crazy to think about. But the amount of development that he's getting and the amount of potential that he's showing already, man, the future is going to be something to watch. I'm so excited about it. And another thing too, I kind of wanted to bring up, just last little point is Charles Snowden has been weirdly quiet this year. He had, I think, 3 tackles in last game and 3 or 4 in the first game. I definitely expected to see a little more production out of him, hoping that maybe he'll kind of have it coming here soon. So we'll see about that, But I think overall, I think this defense is just that good where, guys like him, they're going to fill their role, and obviously I think everybody's just stepping up right now, quite frankly. But
yeah, and I think Charles he's been doing his part in the defensive scheme. He hasn't been making any huge plays, but he does set the edge well, and he also attracts a lot of attention from the defense. Obviously, you'll hear other coaches and analysts out there on ESPN raving about him. And what I've always kind of thought was, and this is no disrespect to Charles Snowden whatsoever. Obviously, I recognize how great of a player he is, and I'm super thankful we have him. But when people talk about Charles Snowden, the things they say about versatility, size, length, his ability to put pressure on the quarterback, the whole time I'm just thinking, like, man, they've got him confused with Noah Taylor. Like, I'm sorry, like, to me, Noah Taylor shows that extra step of versatility. The guy was lined up at safety, free safety, multiple times against Clemson, and still is able to get into the backfield on the plays he's lined up at linebacker and put pressure on the quarterback. And, again, no disrespect to Charles Snowden whatsoever, but I think Noah Taylor is just really showing like his draft potential game in and game out. And he's one that, fingers crossed we can hold on to him for a couple more seasons. But the second NFL scouts start to get a little bit of energy around him, they're going to love what they see with Noah Taylor. So I think while Charles Snowden has been a little bit quiet, guys like Noah Taylor and Matt Gam have both stepped up and produced. So, I think that's something that hopefully as those guys continue to perform, they'll attract a bit more attention from the opposing offense, and maybe it'll open something up for Charles Snowden to come out there and make one of his trademark lanky arm sacks.
For sure. So, going into the last thing, as we always do, we talk about, what's our final score prediction. And, obviously we made our predictions at the beginning of the year. I predicted 35-14. You predicted 38-14. Pretty much the same thing for the both of us as far as score goes. For me personally, after watching NC State, especially last week against Pitt, I'm going to give them an extra touchdown, but I'm also going to give us an extra touchdown. I don't think NC State's defense is going to be able to hold up, and especially with the amount of points that we've put up so far, I definitely expect our offense to have a big day. So I'm going to go with a final score of 42-21. I think NC State maybe will get a trash time touchdown or something like that. But overall, I think they're a team that could definitely move the football a little bit. So I think it's going to be a little bit more points than probably I originally expected.
Yeah, and I had the 38-14. I thought about amending my score to something like 35-24, but I'm going to stick with my gut since so far it's done a pretty decent job. One thing is, like, I really want to look for the defense to like amp it up this game and put a stop to a team that has shown an ability to put up points on the board. I think it'd be awesome to hold an NC State team to 14 points, especially given the way they played against Pitt and Wake Forest, where they were moving the ball down the field and causing some problems. It's just a matter of which NC State team is going to show up. Is it going to be the one that came out against Virginia Tech and looked super flat and basically got steamrolled in the first quarter? Or is it going to be one that comes out and competes in a game against a ranked opponent on the road like Pitt, who has a really stout defense. They might still be figuring out who they are, and obviously we're still figuring out who we are as well. But I think that our offense, should it execute, it shouldn't have any problems putting up points on the board. It's just going to be a matter of limiting them, in my opinion. And I think that's the way the game's going to go. And I'm going to put faith in this UVA defense to really crank it up another notch and show what they're made of. And, I think that hopefully this ends up being a comfortable win for the boys.
For sure. So that's pretty much all we have for today. As always, give us a follow on social media at @ATR_pod on Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Leave us a comment under the video. Tell us what you like, what you dislike. Tell us about what your thoughts on the game are. Leave us a review as well. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, everything that you could imagine. You'll be able to find this. And, we hope you enjoyed the show. And one thing that we want to let you know is that we will have a little surprise coming for you guys next week that we're really looking forward to. So we hope you guys enjoy your game day, and go Hoos.
Go Hoos.
Stop.